November 2014 from M&T Bank Stadium in Baltimore, Maryland. It was the Tennessee Titans at the Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore won the toss and they elected to defer, so the Titans would take over first. They started on their own 20, and they marched the ball downfield, across midfield, and into Baltimore territory all the way down to the 1 yard line. But on second and goal from the 1, Green ended up fumbling as Hatoli Nada forced the fumble, and Guy recovered for the Ravens. So the Ravens took over on their own 5 yard line. They would go 3 and out as they punted the ball back to Tennessee. They came up with that huge goal line stand. And so now the Titans took over with about 5 minutes left in the first quarter. They started on their own 42, and they would bring the ball all the way down into the red zone. And then on first and goal from the 3 yard line, this time they wouldn't be denied as Zach Mettenberger hit Leon Washington for a 3 yard touchdown pass that put the first points on the scoreboard as the Tennessee Titans now led 7-0 over the Baltimore Ravens. So now the Ravens took over on their own 20 with less than half a minute left in the first, and they would bring the first quarter to a close when Flacco hit Jiznik for a 7 yard pass. They would bring the ball to the 22. And so after 1 quarter of play, the score was Tennessee 7, Baltimore 0. So the Ravens opened things up in the second quarter with a 2nd and 8 on the 22, their own 22. Flacco then hit Aiken for a 13 yard pass, and then Flacco threw a 16 yard pass to Jiznik. And so now it was first down on the 49, but they wouldn't get much further as they would end up punting the ball from the 48 a few plays later. So now Tennessee took over, and they would go 3 and out, and they would punt the ball back to the Ravens, who took over on the Tennessee 46 with about 10.5 minutes left before halftime. And they would end up bringing the ball all the way down into the red zone. They were faced with 3rd and 5 from the 13. Flacco hit Torrey Smith for a 4 yard pass. And so then they were faced with 4th and 1 on the Tennessee 9. And they handed it off to Forsett. He didn't bother just picking up the first down. He got a touchdown. And so now it was tied up at 7 apiece with the 9 yard run by Forsett. So now Tennessee would go 3 and out and punt the ball back to the Ravens, who now took over on their own 27 with about 5 minutes left before halftime, but they went 3 and out. And so now Tennessee would get the ball back, and they would go 3 and out for the second consecutive possession and the third between the two. And so now Baltimore would take over, and they would go 3 and out for their second consecutive possession, which would make 4 possessions in a row where the defenses forced 3 and outs. So now Tennessee took over, and they actually picked up a first down on first down, but then they would falter, and the punting unit would come out and punt yet again. So now the Ravens would take the ball on their own 30 with less than a minute left, and Flacco was sacked by Morgan, and that was it. The game went to halftime. So at halftime, this game was tied up at 7 apiece, and coming out of the locker rooms, the Ravens would have the ball first to start off the third quarter. They had it on their own 22. Flacco hit Steve Smith for a 12 yard pass to bring it out to the 34. But that would be it, though, as they would end up punting the ball from their own 35 a couple plays later. So now Tennessee took over, and they went 3 and out, which was a motif at this point. And so now the Ravens took over on their own 28 with about 11.5 minutes left in the third. They brought the ball down the field, across midfield, into Tennessee territory as they kept chipping away. And then finally, 1st and 10 on the Tennessee 11. Forsett runs it in for an 11-yard touchdown run as he gets his second touchdown of this game. And now the Ravens took the lead for the first time in the game with the score now 14-7, Baltimore over Tennessee. Tennessee would do what they do as they went 3 and out yet again. And so now the Ravens would take over. They then caught the 3 and out bug because they went 3 and out as well, as it was all about defense. Tennessee then went 3 and out for the umpteenth time, as now they would punt it back to the Ravens, who would now get the ball with about a half minute left in the third. They brought the third quarter to a close when Forsett ran for 9 yards on second down to bring it to the 44. And so after 3 quarters of play, the score was 14-7, Baltimore over Tennessee. To open things up in the fourth, it was 3rd and 1 on the Tennessee 44 for the Ravens, and Forsett picked up a first down with a 9-yard run. A couple plays later, it was 3rd and 7 from the Tennessee 32. Flacco dropped back to pass, and he hit Torrey Smith for a 32-yard touchdown. And it was now 21-7 as the Ravens had scored 21 unanswered points after having been down 7-0. So now the Tennessee Titans would take over on their own 25 with about 13 minutes left in this game, and they went, you guessed it, 3 and out. So now the Ravens would take over on their own 10 with about 11 minutes left. They would eat up some clock, but then on the Tennessee 40, they would be forced to punt the ball. So they ate up about 6.5 minutes, and they punted the ball to Tennessee, who would now be backed up against their own end zone on their own 1-yard line with less than 5 minutes left in this game, and they needed 2 touchdowns. They would get out of the shadow of their own end zone, and they made it all the way out to the 40. But then Zach Mettenberger was dropped back to pass, and he was intercepted by Gorrer. So Gorrer got the interception, and the Ravens took back over on their own on the Tennessee 39 with only 2.5 minutes left. And after having picked up a couple of first downs, it was now 2nd and goal on the Tennessee 1. But instead of adding insult to injury, they just decided to take a pair of knees. They could have easily scored, potentially. Nothing's easy in this game. But the final score, Baltimore 21, Tennessee 7. And in this game, Joe Flacco was 16 for 27 with 169 passing yards and 1 touchdown. And Zach Mettenberger was 16 for 27 with 179 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. The leading rusher in this game was Justin Forsett with 20 carries for 112 yards and 2 touchdowns. Bishop Sankey had 58 yards off of 17 carries. The leading receiver was Torrey Smith with 75 yards off of 5 receptions, one of which was for a touchdown. And the leading tackler in this game was Avery Williamson for the Tennessee Titans. He had 10 tackles. The leading tackler for the Ravens was Suggs with 6 tackles. He also had 1.5 sacks. Elvis Dumervil had 2.5 sacks. Jernigan had 1 sack. And that combines for 5 total sacks for the Ravens. Tennessee had 1 sack. That was Morgan with the lone sack for Tennessee. And the lone interception was for Baltimore with Gorrer, who had that pick. So Baltimore's defense let up that early touchdown, but after that, they shut out the Tennessee Titans for the next 3 quarters as they scored 3 touchdowns, 1 in each of the next remaining 3 quarters. As each quarter saw a touchdown. The first quarter, Tennessee scored a touchdown, and then the second quarter, the third quarter, and the fourth quarter, the Ravens got an individual touchdown in each. And the final score, Baltimore 21, Tennessee 7.